I'm Caroline Blake, 33 years old, and for most of my life, I was the one they leaned on when the fridge broke. I covered it when the insurance lapsed. I paid it when my younger brother defaulted on another loan. I fixed it quietly without fanfare at every holiday, every birthday. I showed up arms full, smile on checkbook ready, and still, the moment my father said she'll pay everything, not one of them flinched. Not my mother, not my brother, not even me. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and tap that like and subscribe button if you've ever carried more than your share just to keep the peace. I was raised in Indiana, just outside Bloomington, in a small town where folks still waved at each other from their porches. My dad, Thomas, worked at the local water treatment plant until his back gave out. My mom, Linda, taught piano lessons out of our living room, soft-spoken, church-going, careful with every dollar. They raised us to believe in loyalty, in sticking by family, in doing what's right even when it's hard. I took that to heart. When I got my first job at 19, I didn't spend a cent on myself for months. Every paycheck went toward groceries, past due bills, and that stack of final notice envelopes piled on the kitchen table. By the time I was 25, I had a stable career in project management, a tidy little apartment, and a decent credit score, the kind of foundation you build when you know no one's coming to rescue you. But instead of giving me breathing room, my success turned into an open invitation. I became the safety net, quietly, automatically. When Dad needed surgery and the deductible was more than they expected, I canceled my trip to Seattle and wired the money. When my brother Luke wrecked his credit with some cryptocurrency scheme, I co-signed on a car so he could keep his delivery job. When the roof started leaking again, I sent $15,000 for repairs without asking for a receipt. They always said the same thing. "We're so lucky to have you, Caroline. You're our steady one." But I didn't feel steady. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, but the kind that settles into your bones when you realize you've stopped living for yourself. There were no thank yous beyond the moment. No follow-up. No one ever asked how I was doing. When I showed up alone to Christmas dinner, no one noticed. When I missed Mom's birthday call because I was working late, she said, "It's fine," but there was a chill in her voice that didn't thaw. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just a rough patch, that one day things would ease up, but something kept tugging at me, a quiet sense that maybe this wasn't a phase, so I started pulling away, carefully, silently. I moved my savings to a credit union out of state. I stopped mentioning raises. I watched what happened when I stopped offering, how the calls dried up, how the affection dimmed. I wasn't the good daughter anymore. I was the one who'd stopped giving. And in my family, that made me dangerous. It was a voicemail from my mother that tipped it. "Hey, sweetie, call when you get a second. We need to talk about something. No details, no urgency. Just something in her tone practiced too calm." A few days later, Luke texted, "You coming to dinner Sunday? We've got some stuff to run by you." They never phrased it like that. Not once. So I checked the locks on everything I'd built, reviewed my accounts, ran a credit report. Everything was quiet. But I could feel it in my gut something was coming. By Sunday, I'd already made my choice. What they didn't know was I'd been preparing. And this time I wasn't walking into a family dinner. I was walking into a setup. The dinner was quiet, too quiet. My mother had made her usual roast chicken, the kind she always served when she wanted things to feel normal. Luke was drinking soda straight from the can, and my father, in his worn flannel shirt, talked about the neighbor's new pickup like we were just catching up. But I knew better. This wasn't dinner. It was a delay. I sat at the edge of the table with my notebook open in front of me, blank pages, neutral face. I'd brought nothing but a calm that didn't go deeper than the surface. The conversation dragged on weather gas prices, how early the leaves were falling this year. I nodded when appropriate, kept my voice even, and waited. My mother folded her hands neatly on the table. My father cleared his throat. That was the shift. "Caroline," he said, his tone low, like he was easing into bad news. "Your brother's in a situation. Legal, mostly. A business matter that got out of hand." Luke didn't look at me. He leaned back in his chair like this had all been rehearsed. "It's about 2:10, he said flatly. "I've got 30 days before it hits the courts." I didn't ask questions. "We've thought it through," my mother said quickly. "We just need a little help, just to get things back on track. Nothing permanent." Then my father said it. "She'll pay everything. Not a suggestion, not a question, a statement." That was the moment it all became clear. No hesitation, no discussion, no consideration that I might not agree. It wasn't even about whether I could afford it. In their minds, I wasn't a person who might have thoughts or limits or plans of her own. I was the answer, the solution, the one who fixes things. I looked across the table at 3 people I'd shared holidays and hospital visits with, birthdays and blizzards, and the little moments that are supposed to mean something. But there wasn't a trace of doubt in their expressions, not even curiosity about how I felt. I didn't respond. I didn't blink. I closed my notebook, slowly stood up from the table, and pushed in my chair. My coat was already hanging by the door. I put it on without saying a word. "Caroline," my mother said, her voice rising behind me. I kept walking. "We just want to—" I shut the door gently behind me. I didn't go home. Not to the apartment with framed pictures of us on the bookshelf. Not to the casserole dish in the fridge I'd made the night before, thinking I'd be too tired to cook when I got back. I drove for hours. No destination, just movement. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot of a diner off the interstate. One of those places that never closes, where the lights hum a little and the coffee smells like every road trip you've ever taken. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the car with the engine running and my hands still on the wheel. The quiet wasn't empty. It was clean. My phone buzzed. "Mom." "Where did you go, Dad? We need to finish the conversation." "Luke, seriously. You're just going to leave like that?" I didn't reply. That night, I logged into every financial account I owned. Bank statements, savings, retirement. I initiated transfers, changed passwords, locked down everything with 2-factor authentication. The joint account I once opened for my mother, where I'd left a few hundred out of habit, now sat at 0. I removed location sharing, deleted the shared family calendar. I changed my number. By morning, I'd packed 1 suitcase. I left behind the couch I bought so we'd have seating when they visited for Thanksgiving. Left the picture frames, the throw blankets, the little holiday mugs they always noticed when they came by. I crossed state lines and checked into a furnished rental with a short lease and clean walls. No family photos, no memories waiting to sneak up on me. Just quiet. By the end of the week, the messages changed. "We raised you better than this. Your brother is in real trouble. This isn't how family works." And then the one that said it all, "We don't have anyone else." Exactly. They didn't. And now they didn't have me either. I was folding sweaters in the small dresser when a number I didn't recognize lit up my phone. I hesitated, then answered. Caroline Luke said no greeting, just my name. I didn't respond. "Look, I get it," he said. "You're mad. But this isn't just about you. Okay? It's about family." There it was, that word again. "You didn't say anything." He went on. "You just walked out. You ghosted us." "I walked away," I said. "There's a difference. You could have said something." "You weren't listening," I said. "None of you were. You already made the decision. You just wanted me there to sign off on it." He was quiet for a beat. "I'm going to lose everything," he said, softer now. "The apartment, the car, maybe even jail time. You should have thought of that before you started playing with other people's money," I said. "I didn't gamble. You lied," I said. "To investors, to Mom and Dad. And now you want me to clean it up. Again. I'm your brother. I looked down at the drawer, neatly folded sweaters in soft colors. "I know," I said. "That's the saddest part. You're really going to let me go to jail. I'm not letting you do anything. You made choices. I'm making mine." He was quiet again. "Then Jesus, Caroline, you used to care." "I did," I said. "So much that I emptied myself trying to fix what wasn't mine to fix." He didn't answer. "Please," he said finally, "I'm begging you." I looked out the window. The maple trees were swaying in the wind. Nobody knew I was here. I told you before I said, "Don't beg me. Beg someone else." And I ended the call. No messages followed, no emails. They must have realized the door had closed. It came on a Thursday late afternoon. I was packing up my laptop at the co-working space downtown when the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. "Caroline Blake, someone from legal is here for you." The room fell away for a moment, not completely, just enough to feel the difference. A man in a gray windbreaker handed me a manila envelope, said my name, without looking at me, and walked out. Inside was a civil complaint, filed by my parents, Frank and Linda Blake. They were claiming the money I'd given them over the years wasn't support, it was debt, that I'd agreed verbally to repay them, and that my refusal now was causing them emotional distress and financial hardship. There were no contracts, no written terms, just their word against mine, backed by years of silence they had mistaken for agreement. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I walked down the street to a small cafe with metal chairs and paper napkins, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. I searched my inbox until I found the contact Susan had sent me months ago, back when I'd first started thinking about what walking away might really look like. Carol Kim, civil defense attorney, known for being calm, clear, and firm. I forwarded her the complaint, attached a scanned copy, a spreadsheet I'd kept for years, and dozens of bank records, all labeled, all organized. Every transfer I'd made, every expense I'd covered, none of it marked as a loan. She called within 10 minutes. "They don't have a case," she said. "No written agreements, no documentation. If they want to bring this into court, we'll meet them there." I was quiet for a moment. "Can we counter?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Emotional distress, harassment, even financial damages if we want to push." I didn't say anything right away, not because I was unsure, just because the idea of suing my own parents even now still felt like touching a bruise I'd learned to ignore. "I don't want their money," I said finally. "I just want them gone." She understood. I ended the call, closed the laptop, and slid the envelope into my bag. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else, something steadier. That weekend I started packing again. Not because of the lawsuit, not because I needed to run, but because I was done. There was nothing left to go back to. I had already signed a lease 2 states away, a small place close to the water, far from memory. I moved through the apartment like I was walking through a version of myself I no longer recognized. The baking pans I'd used when they came to visit, gone. The scarves Mom had given me for birthdays, donation. The holiday photos, tossed. I kept the financial binder, slid it into my suitcase last. By Sunday morning, the apartment was clean, the fridge was empty, the drawers were bare, 1 suitcase by the door. That was it. I got one last call. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Are you really doing this?" Luke's voice thin and tight. "You're just leaving." "I already left," I said. "You just didn't notice." I could lose everything he said like it was new. The apartment, my license, my business. I'll have nothing. I already have nothing, I said. No trust, no family. Just a long list of times I said yes when I wanted to say no. He was quiet. "I was scared," he said eventually. I nodded, though he couldn't see. "I know," I said, "but being scared doesn't give you permission to use someone. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't think about me at all," I said. He sighed. "Please, Caroline. Please." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I told you before I said, "Don't beg me. Beg someone else." Then I ended the call. No text followed. No emails. Maybe this time, he finally heard me. The new apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony, faint smell of fresh paint and sea air. But it was mine. No one else had the key. No one knew the address. No one had ever stood in that doorway but me. I set my suitcase down in the hallway and took a slow breath. There were no casseroles in the oven, no welcome back signs, no family waiting at the table, just stillness. That night I slept without checking my phone. No alerts, no reminders, no one to fix. The next morning I opened my laptop and typed a single sentence at the top of a blank document. A mission statement. Something that had lived in the back of my mind for years, waiting for space to breathe. A nonprofit, small, focused, to help people, especially women, regain control when their families confuse love with entitlement. I named it Second Ledger, because sometimes the real accounting isn't in numbers, it's in boundaries, in silence, in finally saying enough. It was early morning when I stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled like salt and fresh paint, and the light hadn't quite reached over the rooftops yet. I stood there with a mug of coffee I hadn't touched and watched the street below wake up slowly. A jogger passed with a golden retriever. A bakery truck backed into the alley next door. No one looked up. No one knew me here. I hadn't spoken out loud since I moved in, aside from ordering takeout or saying thank you at the hardware store. There was something calming about that. Everything around me was still unfamiliar, but it was clean, uncluttered. I pulled out the manila folder from my bag and laid it on the kitchen counter. Inside were old notes, some rough sketches I jotted down late at night over the past few years. I hadn't called it anything back then, just ideas, lists of names, phrases that stuck with me. But now, sitting in that bare kitchen with the sunlight starting to stretch across the tile, I knew what I wanted to build. The nonprofit wasn't about revenge or proof. It was something else, something steadier. I opened a blank document on my laptop and started typing. Second Ledger, a place for people, mostly women, who had been made to feel like they owed everything to everyone, the ones who covered rent and college and dental bills without ever being asked how they were doing, the ones who stayed quiet because speaking up would mean losing what little connection they had left. I didn't write a mission statement that day. Not yet. I just started with one sentence: "We exist to help you stop disappearing." That afternoon, I drove to the post office and picked up a new P.O. box. I paid cash and asked no questions. The clerk handed me the key and slid the paperwork across the counter without looking up. It fit easily in the small zippered pocket of my purse. The apartment was still mostly empty, just the suitcase, a fold-out table I'd picked up at a garage sale, and a mattress on the floor. No decorations, no framed pictures. I wasn't trying to make it feel like home. I just needed somewhere to be still. Later that week, I walked to the edge of the marina, where the water lapped against the stone wall, and the boats swayed gently in their slips. A few people nodded as they passed, bundled in jackets, hands wrapped around paper cups. I stood there a long time listening. I wasn't thinking about what I'd left behind. Not exactly. But the quiet had a way of filling in the gaps, memories. I hadn't invited voices I hadn't heard in a while. Luke sitting at the kitchen table years ago, telling me his first business idea like it was a sure thing. My mother humming while she made dinner, counting change in her palm before running to the store. My father laughing at the TV remote in hand, calling me our rock like it was a compliment. They were still there somewhere in the background, but smaller now, less heavy. I didn't regret walking away, but there were moments like standing by the water or brushing my teeth before bed when I felt the outline of what I used to carry. Not the weight, just the shape of it. That night I went through the last box I'd brought. Just a few papers, a phone charger, some clipped articles. Near the bottom was a birthday card from years ago, from my mother. I turned it over in my hands. On the inside, in her cursive handwriting, it said, "You always know what to do. We're so lucky to have you." I put it aside, not to keep, just not to carry anymore. The next morning, I called Carol Kim, the attorney. She answered on the second ring. Any movement I asked. No formal response yet, she said. But I've heard from their lawyer. They're pushing for mediation, soft pressure, likely hoping you'll back down before they have to make it official. I didn't speak. You don't have to respond, she said. You're not required to participate unless you want to. I don't, I said. Good, she replied. Then we wait. I thanked her and hung up. That was it. No drama, no tension, just a clean decision. I spent the rest of that week walking along the coastline in the mornings and working on the nonprofit in the afternoons. I drafted templates for the website, looked into grants, made a spreadsheet of potential partner organizations. I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't care. It wasn't about finishing. It was about starting something that wasn't for anyone else. That Friday, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address. The envelope was thin and pale blue. I knew the handwriting. Caroline, I'm sorry, not just for the lawsuit or how we handled everything with Luke. I'm sorry I never saw you as more than someone who could fix things. You deserved better. I hope someday you'll forgive us. Mom. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk. Not to display, not to answer, just to put it away. The next step wasn't loud. It wasn't public. There was no announcement, no big reveal, just a form, a click, and a name that meant something different now than it used to. I registered Second Ledger as a nonprofit in the state of Maine. The confirmation email came through on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. No celebration, just a slow exhale and a walk down to the corner bakery for a coffee I didn't need. Back at the apartment, I set the laptop on the fold-out table and began drafting the first guide. Not for donors or volunteers, this one was for the women I hoped to reach. The ones like me. I called it Where to Start When You're the Safety Net. It wasn't fancy, just a 5-page PDF with clear steps, how to track what you've given, how to protect your credit, how to create distance without guilt. I wrote it like I wished someone had written it for me 5 years earlier. A few nights later, I uploaded it to the basic website I'd pieced together myself. No photos, no testimonials, just plain text and soft colors. At the bottom of the page was a message box. I didn't expect anyone to use it yet. The first message came 2 days later. Her name was Angela. She was 54, divorced, with 2 grown sons, one who still lived in her basement, and another who only called when he needed help with his mortgage. She had been taking money out of her retirement to keep things afloat. I thought being needed was the same as being loved, she wrote. Now I just feel invisible. I sat with her message open for a while. Then I typed a short reply. Not advice, not a solution, just something simple. You're not the only one, and it's not your fault. That was the first real moment I felt it. This wasn't just something I'd started. It was something I could build. I kept going, quietly. After dinner before sunrise during the middle of the day when my thoughts were clearest, I added a second download, How to Close Shared Financial Accounts Without Burning Bridges. Then another, Talking Boundaries with People Who Don't Hear You. Every resource I uploaded someone used. Not hundreds, not yet, but enough to know the silence I'd lived in wasn't mine alone. I got used to the rhythm of the new life. Walks in the morning, laptop open by 10, grocery trips on Tuesdays when the store was quiet. I added 2 houseplants and a small second-hand chair to the living room. It still didn't feel like home, but it didn't have to. Then one afternoon, as I was adding a section to the volunteer page, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Caroline," a man's voice said. "This is Brad. I work with your parents' legal team." I didn't say anything. They're requesting mediation again. Informal, no court involvement, just a sit down. They're saying it could be handled in an afternoon. "No," I said. "Are you sure?" he asked. "They're open to resolving this quietly. Your mother's written a letter your brother wants to be present." "I'm not interested," I said. "I understand," he replied. "If you change your mind, I won't." I ended the call. The letter from my mother was still in the drawer. I hadn't opened it again, but I hadn't thrown it away either. A few nights later, I walked to the harbor. The boats were rocking gently in the slips, and a cold breeze was picking up from the north. I sat on a bench with a notebook in my lap, not writing anything, just watching the sky shift from gray to blue. Across the water, a row of cottages blinked with early porch lights. No one knew me here. No one asked for anything. When I walked back to the apartment, the street was empty. I checked the mailbox at the corner and found a plain white envelope. My name on the front. No return address. Inside was a single line typed and centered. "We were wrong. Please come back." No signature, no explanation. I folded it once and set it on the counter. It stayed there for 3 days. By the end of that week, I made my decision. Not about them, about me. I filed for a business license to open a physical support center for Second Ledger. Just a small space, nothing more than a desk, 2 chairs, and a bookshelf. But it would be real. A place someone could walk into and say, "I'm tired," and not be dismissed. I found the listing online, former insurance office, good location, low rent, no frills. I booked an appointment to view it the next morning. That night, I stood in the kitchen with the envelope still sitting unopened beside the sink. I didn't need to read it again. I already knew what it would say. And what it wouldn't. I placed it in the bottom drawer next to the first letter, then turned off the light. The space was smaller than I expected, maybe 500 square feet, with scuffed laminate floors, and a dusty window that overlooked a quiet side street. The front door creaked a little when I opened it, and the air inside smelled faintly of printer ink and old carpet glue. But I stood in the middle of it with both hands in my coat pockets and knew it was right. The landlord was a retired contractor named Gene. He handed me the keys without much conversation, just a nod and a handshake. I signed the lease that afternoon. That night, I sat on the floor near the window and made a list. Paint, a second chair, a locking file cabinet. I didn't need much, just enough to make it functional. The rest would come later. The next morning, I got to work. I spent hours pulling staples out of the walls and wiping dust from the shelves. A friend from the co-working space offered to help paint. We went with a soft gray-blue, something neutral, but warm. I ordered a table online and picked up 2 used chairs from a consignment shop across town. By the end of the week, it was ready. No sign, no ribbon cutting, no announcement. Just a small brass plaque on the door, Second Ledger Resource Center. I opened the doors on a Monday. By Wednesday, someone showed up. Her name was Teresa, mid-60s, wore a long wool coat and carried a manila folder with her documents clipped neatly inside. She didn't make eye contact right away, but she sat down across from me and unfolded the pages slowly. "I've been helping my sister with her bills since 2009, she said. "It started with groceries. Then her car broke down. Then the house needed repairs." She paused. "She's on my credit card now. I didn't notice how bad it had gotten until I applied for a home equity loan, and they said no." I didn't interrupt, just listened. When she finished, I slid a fresh worksheet across the table and walked her through each step. Not legal advice, not financial planning, just structure. A way to see things clearly. Sometimes that's all people need. That evening, I stayed late to update the intake forms and reorder more folders. The printer jammed halfway through a stack, and I had to run to the store for toner. The sidewalk was wet from a light drizzle, and I walked home under an umbrella with a paper bag under one arm. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message came through a minute later. I didn't recognize the voice. "Hi, this is Erica James from Common Ground, a local radio program. We heard about your nonprofit from one of our listeners, Teresa McConnell, I believe. We'd love to speak with you on air about what you're doing." I saved the message but didn't call back right away. The next morning, I checked the mail at the center. There was a small white envelope addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a folded note. "You're being talked about. That's all I'll say. I'm sorry it's come to this." No signature. I locked the door and sat down at the desk. That afternoon, I called Carol Kim. "There's movement," I said. "Not legal, just behind the scenes." She sighed. "Have you heard from your brother again?" "No." "Then I'd guess your parents are trying another angle. Public pressure, maybe. Or someone close to them is watching what you're doing and it's making them uncomfortable. Should I be worried?" "Not legally," she said. "They don't have standing, but stay alert." 2 days later, I got a text from a number I hadn't seen in months. "We didn't think you'd go this far." It was from Luke. I stared at it for a long time before pressing delete. That Sunday, I got an email from a woman named Jill. She worked for a foundation that offered small grants to women-led initiatives. She said a friend had forwarded her our site. She wanted to set up a meeting. When we spoke, she asked how long I'd been running Second Ledger. "Just a few months," I said. "Well," she replied, "it looks like you've been at this much longer." We talked for nearly an hour. She asked thoughtful questions. I gave honest answers. At the end of the call, she said, "We're going to fund your next year. Full support, no restrictions." I didn't know what to say. The grant came through the next week. I paid the first year's rent on the center in full and upgraded the furniture. I added 3 new modules to the online resource library and hired a part-time coordinator to manage the inbox. Then I sent an update to Carol. She responded immediately. "You know this flips the story right." "What do you mean?" "Up until now they thought you walked away, that you cut them off. But now you're being seen, supported, respected. That makes them nervous." I didn't answer. I just read the message again quietly. The next morning, I received a certified letter. It was from Luke's attorney. Not about the lawsuit, not a new demand, just a statement. Mr. Blake would like to formally rescind all claims made in the initial complaint. He regrets the filing and acknowledges the financial contributions were made in good faith without expectation of repayment. I brought the letter to the center and filed it under closed. That night, I stood in the middle of the office with the lights off, watching the reflection of the streetlights move across the floor. Everything was quiet. No threats, no messages, just stillness. The formal withdrawal from Luke's attorney came in a clean white envelope sealed and stamped. I slid it into a file marked "Resolved" and closed the drawer with a quiet click. There was no victory speech, no announcement, just a moment, and then the moment passed. Things moved quickly after that. The Foundation's grant made it possible to open our doors full-time. I hired a part-time outreach coordinator. Her name was Brenna, a retired social worker who'd once walked away from her own family under circumstances not so different from mine. She took over the intake desk, started a weekly support group, and reorganized the resource shelves without being asked. People kept coming. Women in their 50s, 60s, even a few in their early 30s. Some brought printed spreadsheets of everything they'd paid on behalf of family members, loans that were never repaid, bills no one else acknowledged. Others came with nothing but stories. Not everyone needed advice. Most just needed to be heard. One morning, I arrived early to prep for a city council meeting. There was a stack of local ordinances to review, and I was hoping to finish before noon. But when I unlocked the front door, I found an envelope taped to the glass. No postage, just my name written in block letters. Inside was a folded page. Typed. A single paragraph. We didn't know how to stop asking. You never said no, so we kept going. That wasn't fair. I know that now. I hope someday you'll come home. There was no name, but I recognized the phrasing. I didn't bring it inside. I folded it twice, tucked it into my coat pocket, and walked it across the street to the small cafe. I ordered tea, sat by the window, and read it again without rushing. That same day, Brenna mentioned we'd received a voicemail. Woman didn't leave a name, she said. But I think you should hear it. She pressed play. The voice was soft, a little unsteady. I think what you're doing is beautiful. I was that person once, the one who always bailed everyone out. I thought if I just gave enough, eventually they'd treat me better. I didn't realize I was teaching them how to take. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. She hung up before leaving her number. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a community event, just a small panel hosted by a women's financial collective downtown. I didn't plan to say much, just explain what Second Ledger did and why we existed. But when I stepped onto the stage and looked out over the audience, I noticed someone in the third row. It was my mother, hair pulled back, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing the same tan cardigan I remembered from Thanksgiving dinners years ago. I didn't stop speaking. I didn't change my words. I just continued. Afterward, she waited at the back of the room while a few people came up to ask questions. She didn't interrupt, just stood quietly holding her purse with both hands. When the room cleared, she walked over. "Caroline," she said. I nodded, said nothing. "I didn't come to talk you out of anything," she said. "I just wanted to see what you built." I waited. "It's a good thing," she said. "You always had a good heart." I didn't respond. I brought something. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. It was old creases along the corners, sun-faded. It showed me at 10 years old, sitting on the porch steps with Luke beside me. I was holding a lemonade pitcher. He had one sock on and jelly on his chin. "You used to say you wanted to take care of people," she said. "I didn't realize you meant yourself, too." She held the photo out. I didn't take it. "I don't need that," I said. She lowered her hand. "I'll leave it with the event organizer," she said gently, "if you ever want it." Then she turned and left. I didn't follow her. The next morning, I went to the office early and opened the windows. The breeze was strong, and for the first time all week, the street was quiet. I took down the grant certificate from the bulletin board and replaced it with a new flyer, our next workshop, saying no without explaining yourself. We had 20 RSVPs by noon. That afternoon, I met with a woman named Lana. She was 62, widowed, and raising her granddaughter. Her son, she told me, had drained her savings years ago. She hadn't spoken to him since. She looked around the center carefully. "I almost didn't come," she said. "I thought maybe I didn't belong here. But then I saw your page on financial estrangement, and it felt like you wrote it just for me." I handed her a resource packet and offered her a chair. She sat down slowly. "Do you think it's okay," she asked, "to forgive someone without letting them back in?" "Yes," I said. She nodded. That's what I needed to know. That evening, I walked down to the marina. The air was cooler now, the days getting shorter. The boats rocked gently in the slips, and the sky was low with clouds. I leaned on the railing and watched the horizon shift between gray and blue. There was no need to speak, no one to call, No one to explain myself to. Just the water, the wind, and the steady sound of waves against stone. It's been nearly a year since I left. The office downtown now has soft chairs, shelves of printed guides, and a small coffee pot that's always warm by 10. We added a sign on the door last month, simple gold lettering with the words, "Second Ledger," etched clean and steady across the glass. People stop by almost every day now, some for help, some just to sit. I don't think about the lawsuit anymore. The paperwork is filed, the file is closed, and no more letters have come. Luke hasn't reached out again, and my parents, I imagine they're still where they've always been, maybe talking less about me these days, maybe not. I haven't gone back, but I haven't moved again either. The apartment's still quiet, still small. I added a coat rack by the door and a rug for the hallway. I hung up one photo me by the ocean taken by a woman I helped through the center. She gave it to me the day she finally closed a shared account with her brother after 27 years. "This is what peace looks like," she said, "in case you forget." I don't forget. Sometimes I wake up before sunrise when the town is still asleep and walk down to the harbor with my hands in my pockets and the wind pressing close. I don't bring my phone. I don't bring anything, just myself. And that's enough. I used to think the hardest part was walking away, but it wasn't. The hardest part was staying gone, when they called, when they apologized, when they said all the right things just long enough to pull me back into the pattern. It takes strength to leave, but it takes something quieter, something deeper to choose your own life again and again after the leaving. I've learned that love, real love, can't be measured by what you give or what you cover or how much you absorb. It's in who sees you when you say no, who respects you when you stop explaining, who lets you exist not for what you can do for them, but simply for who you are. Some people will only love you as long as you stay small, silent, and useful, but you don't have to stay. You can close the door, you can build a new one, and when you do, the world doesn't end. Sometimes it finally begins. Thank you for listening to my story. If any part of it stayed with you, take a moment, share your thoughts below, or send it to someone who might need to hear it. And if you're on your own path to freedom, just know you're not alone anymore.